Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much indeed for this opportunity to be here with you today and talk about these issues of efficiency and responsibility in education. My talk is entitled System Dynamics for Education on Complex Issues. Much of what I say you could cross out system dynamics and you could replace it with simulation in general. We've just seen an example of the use of simulation to help people understand situations, but the work I do happens to be focused in this field of system dynamics because it has a particular power for dealing with complex issues and getting people to understand it. I was just reflecting on the theme of this conference, efficiency and responsibility, and it does seem to me that efficiency in education is increasingly important and very, very demanding. We've got explosive growth in the number of people wanting to learn a whole range of different things. And the old days when lecturer stood in front of 50 people or 20 people and talked at them for 3 hours, that was never very efficient. But things have certainly changed. I recall meeting a South African professor at a conference some years ago, and we were talking about the pressures of teaching. And I said, so tell me about the classes you run. How many students do you teach? He said, I think my largest class is about 700 students. I said, oh, that must be very, very difficult, very challenging. How do you cope with that? And he said, oh, it's not really a problem. I split them into 2 streams of 350 each. So I thought, I felt very lucky that my largest class at the time was about 60. So what that means is that we have to make the very best use of every minute of contact time that we have with the student and make very good use of non-contact time as well. We have to get the learning per minute as fast as we can, as high as we can. And on the responsibility issue, many of us will have flown in an aeroplane recently, and we would like to think that whoever is driving that plane up the front is not learning now. We would prefer to think that they learnt maybe in a plane where you're not a passenger, right? Or maybe possibly with a simulator. Maybe they learnt with a simulator, where they could crash the plane as many times as they like. They could fly into storms, they could have the engines blow up, but none of it would actually affect me. That would be nice. And of course we do that in other fields as well. Surgeons learnt about how to operate on bodies, on live bodies, but they learnt on dead bodies previously, right? That is kind of awkward and not ideal, so increasingly surgeons learn on dummies, on physical dummies, or they learn with virtual reality simulations, where you can go into a body with your surgical tools and you can carry out an operation, but not actually kill the patient if you get it wrong. Now, my field is business. I apologise that much of the examples I will give are about business. I will talk about some other things. But we don't do that in business. We put people through a 12-month or 2-year MBA program. We give them case studies where they are supposed to discuss and learn from the principles of the class illustrated in the case study. Then we throw them out in the real world. And somehow they are supposed to learn on the job. So they take over some company or they rise up a company, and they learn by making mistakes. They learn by making mistakes. And if we look back to the very serious problems of 2008, 2009, yes, the banks didn't exactly help, right? But there would have been yet another downturn in 2008 or 9 in any case, because people had over-invested in the growth of everything from Starbucks to information technology, the shipbuilding industry overbuilt ships, the construction industry overbuilt buildings. It happens all the time. Professor Paul Ormerod has studied every recession in every economy for the last 150 years. And with the exception of wars and commodity crises, every recession in every economy is caused by the business sector. It's not caused by government. It's not caused by consumers. It's caused by the business sector making a mistake. So it would be useful, wouldn't it, if we could send our people out from our business schools having actually practiced on something where they did not crash a business, they did not destroy investors' value in that business, they did not lay off tens of thousands of people because they made a mistake. And that is what simulation can do for you. It can give you practice at things without doing harm to other people. So let me just tell you how I'm planning to go through this. I'm going to talk about the classes of problem that system dynamics is suited to solving and the difficulties that those classes of problem present. I'll then explain how system dynamics deals with those problems and why it is such a hugely powerful tool. It's really powerful. And I will then give a system dynamics-based exercise that shows you how you can get fast and effective learning here. Now, life is nothing without a little risk, so I'm going to take a little risk in the middle of this session. And at that point there, I'm going to give you a chance to actually try one of these simulations. So you might just want to look around and say, can I either get at a laptop, or can I get at a tablet, or can I look over someone's shoulders and see what they're doing? Because you're going to actually run one of these simulations. Now, the simulation I'm going to give you is about a very small and simple and isolated business issue in a SME, a small, medium-sized enterprise. What I'm going to do in the next part, I'm going to lift it up to a much bigger example. And I'm going to illustrate from that you can extract a generic structure for how a business system works and delivers performance, and how that generic structure can be adapted to many, many different kinds of business. So you've got some core principles that are recognizable in lots of different businesses, including, by the way, universities. And then you can take that and you can take bits out and you can add bits in, and then you've got a model of a retail business or an airline or a manufacturer or a law firm or a university. Now, I'm conscious that not everybody in the audience is concerned with education in the business domain, so I'm just going to end with a couple of examples that show you that these principles are not just about business, they are applicable in other domains as well. And I'll also just make a few comments that illustrate for you that the same kinds of learning can be applied at the school level, the high school level and even below that. So let's get on with this idea of what classes of problem it is we're trying to solve. Well, we're looking at what we call dynamic challenges. Challenges of how things change over time. And these things are everywhere. They are all around us. So at a personal level, I might be wanting to get my weight under control. My weight was going up, now it's coming down. There's a major problem around the world about overfishing. We have fished the seas dry of fish. There are no fish of many species in the sea. And that's a history of how the situation has arisen. Diseases like polio. Polio used to be very widespread. I think in the 1990s, about 4,000 or 5,000 cases a year worldwide. We're now down to a few dozen cases worldwide. Now, that's a good thing that's changed. It has changed over time. Some things have changed relatively fast. We're looking at months in the case of how my weight has changed. We're looking at years or even decades for some of those longer term issues. Again, at a personal level, if I look at my bank balance and I see that it's followed that path there, I might be slightly concerned about that and want to do something about it. In cutting crime, we've seen an increase in crime rates in some cities and some countries, and we'd be worried about that. And of course, in my world, we're concerned about improving company profits. I'll give some more examples of that. So in all of those cases, we've got a history. Now, the history is important. The history is important for two reasons. The first reason is that it tells you how the system works. It tells you, if you can figure out why that path has followed the path it has, it tells you how the system works. If you have a hypothesis about how the system works, it should be able to replicate that history. So that's the first reason that history is important. The second reason it's important is because things that happened in the past are already going to affect what is going to happen in the future. And there is nothing you can do about it. Right? If one of your courses at this university last year enrolled only 50% of the target number of students, then in 3 years' time, you cannot possibly graduate more than 50% of the students. That event in 3 years' time is already determined by what you just did. And in some cases, those delays are extremely long. So that's the second reason history is important. So given that we've got some understanding of why the trajectory has followed that path, if it goes on like that, then there is an outcome that we might not like. It's not ideal. We would like it to be better than that. And that's an important trajectory to understand, because it sets a level of importance to solving this problem. You know, how important is it to me that my weight does not go back up again? How important to me is it that the cases of polio do not start to escalate once more? And that problem over there, polio, that's costing billions. I mean, the World Health Organization has spent billions of dollars trying to eradicate polio. So the red outcome would be very bad news indeed. We definitely don't want that. And then we've got the future we would like to see. We would like the green line. We would like our weight to stay down. We'd like those polio cases to be eliminated completely. We would like the crime rate to come back down again. There's a desired future. So what we want to do is we want to understand the system. We want to understand how to manage and design the system so it generates the green line and not the red line. All kinds of similar things arise in my world, in the business world. Cutting staff turnover, we've got too many staff leaving, we'd like that to come down. Rebuilding sales that have fallen. Raising quality. Now, that's an example of a number where less is better. We want fewer failures, so good on that chart is less. Improving cash flow, cutting new product lead times, growing company profits. And once again, we've got the same issue that there is a bad future for all of those things and there is a better future that we would like to bring about. But very often, it's going to take time. You can't go into a business and fix a quality problem just by snapping your fingers. Right? You've got to work at things over periods of time. And once again, history is important because it tells you how the system works and it is already going to determine much of how the future turns out. So let me take you through this first example. This is the simplest kind of business I can find to illustrate these points, and it is a real case. It concerns a small computer support company who were doing quite well. And they, because they were doing quite well, they took the general manager, the owner of the business, didn't have time to do the business development that he would like to do, going and seeing new clients and offering the company services. So he took on a business development person specifically to do that job for him. Will you please go and talk to local building firms and hotels and law firms and offer our computer support services to those? And that person did. They signed up new clients fast, but the result was that the staff in the business became overloaded. They were overloaded because they were having to take on these new clients that the business development person was signing up. And the result of that was that the quality of support suffered. Because the quality suffered, the clients actually started to leave. So we've got the business development person bringing new clients in out one door, and then the poor quality means that clients are leaving out of the opposite door. Added to which, the company now started to have problems with staff turnover. So the worry here's that chart. We've got the client numbers rising, starting to fall. The bad line is client numbers continue to fall. The axis, by the way, does not start at 0, so we're going from 60 to 150. And we'd like the green line to show a recovery in our business growth. So the future risk, the red line, is further staff losses, still worse service, even more clients leave, and how are we going to turn this around? The second example I'll talk about in the second part of my talk concerns a whole large business. And this is the situation faced by Europe's largest airline, Ryanair. And you may recall in 2008, the recession really hit consumer spending, and one of the big casualties of consumer spending is air travel. When people lose their job or their income falls, they still have to pay their rent, they still have to eat, they still have to heat their homes. Do I have to go on holiday to Malaga? Not sure I do. I can forget that this year. I won't be happy, but I can. So this company, it is a very aggressive competitor. I mean, unbelievably aggressive competitor. It has got to lead this industry not by accident. It's extremely vigorous, shall we say, in its competition. Their average fare for a flight is about 45 euros. 45 euros is the average fare. That's the average. A lot of people are paying 20 euros. My daughter-in-law studied in Rome for some time, and in the year where she studied in Rome, she never paid more than 20 euros to fly from London to Rome. Right? That's how tough they are, right? So if you are this competitor and there's a big downturn in the industry, what do you think? Do you think, oh no, my world has fallen in. I'm going to have a major disaster here. This company says, whoa, this is a big opportunity. At that time, they cut their fares by somewhere around 5 to 7 euros. So from an average of 45 to 38, 39, something of that kind. And if you are a competitor and you are losing money at 45 euros, and now you've got to compete at 39, you are in serious trouble. Right? And just to give some sense of the scale here, there are something like 40 low-fare airlines in Europe. 40. You can probably start counting them on your fingers, but then you'll get to about 5 or 6, and then you think, who are all the others? Between 2000 and 2008, 50 new airlines started. By 2008, more than 40 of those 50 had died. Right? There were still 40 left because there were some other ones as well, right? But that just shows how incredibly tough this industry is. And how do they make money? Well, they make money by attracting passengers to come and fly on their flights. So you've got to get the chart on the left to work in order for the chart on the right to be okay. So we need a future plan with more routes and more aircraft growing, more passenger volume, so we can, at good fares, not low fares, so that we can grow profits. Or will it be fewer growth opportunities. We've run out of places to fly to, right? We simply can't find any towns that are big enough to fly to. Will there be difficult market and competitive conditions? Will that force even lower fares and hit our profit? So that's the red line over there. And I see recently that the company did actually report some pressures on profits in 2013. So here are the generic questions we want to answer. Why did we get to where we are? We need to know that because that tells us how the system works. Where might things go if we don't make any changes? And how can we make those changes and make the right changes so that the future is better? So that's a kind of generic statement of our questions. Just a side point, if you're looking at a new venture or a new event, you don't have any history, right? But you still have to answer the red question and the green question. My son is general manager of a small technology startup doing something that no one has ever done before. So we haven't got any past customers, we haven't got any past sales, we haven't got any past profits. But we still have to estimate what is the potential customers, what is the potential revenue, what do I have to put together to serve that market and develop it. Okay, so in new ventures you don't have to do that, and new events too. If a new competitor arrives in your market and it's never happened before, you've got no history of that event, but you've still got to figure out what to do. So why are these problems difficult? Why is it that we struggle to get these things right? And it's a genuine difficulty. You know, it's not that people are dumb. I mean, it really is genuinely difficult. And the problem arises because you're not operating on a kind of production line where you put stuff in at the beginning and finished product comes out at the end, right? It isn't like that. You're working on a complicated system, and it's the system in the middle that causes that disruption between what you thought was a good idea over here and a disappointing outcome on the right-hand side. So in the example I've just, a very common example is a new marketing person comes along and says, hey, you know, here's a great opportunity, let's go out and do more marketing. So you do more marketing, you get more customers, you get more sales and profits. Oh, well, that's pretty good because that means that you can take those sales and profits from the right-hand side, you can put them back into the system, you can spend more on marketing, you can get more customers, you can get more sales, more profits. And everything in your garden is beautiful, right? But as we've just seen, there is an alternative mechanism that might happen here, which is that makes worse customer service. You get fewer customers, you get less profit and sales. And what I've not shown on this chart is that there is then a worse outcome still, which is that because you've got lower sales and profits, you then cut the marketing and you cut the customer support and you cut everything else, which makes the customer service still worse, which means you get even fewer customers, even lower revenue and sales. And I guess we all stay in hotels from time to time. You can always tell a hotel that's in trouble, can't you? Because the carpets are worn out, you know, the paint is chipped, the bed things need replacing, there aren't enough staff around, right? And you just know what it's going to be like next time you come. Right? It's going to be worse, right? Because they haven't got the money to put back into the system to make it work. This is an important point, actually. The system that is a business, investors put their investment into a business, whether it's a person into their own entrepreneurial business or investors on the stock exchange buying shares in a company, because they want to get the cash flow that the system can generate, right? But some of that cash flow has actually got to go back in to keep the system working, right? You can't just keep on taking money out and not put anything back in. Why are these things problematic? Well, there are 4 features of these systems that make life difficult. The first is that there are things in the world around us that accumulate over long periods of time. And Many of our business models don't recognise this accumulation issue at all. Many of them are built on kind of static microeconomic principles, and they don't recognise the importance of accumulations. And what do I mean by that? I mean, for example, that the customers you have today did not all arrive yesterday. Ryanair, we looked at just now, flies about, I'll get the numbers wrong, 70 million passengers a year, something like that. I mean, big numbers, right? That is not actually true. They do not fly 70 odd million passengers. They fly something like 15 million passengers 4 or 5 times a year. Those 15 million people did not all arrive yesterday. They've been flying with Ryanair for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Right? So a customer that Ryanair attracted in 2003 that likes their value for money and is prepared to put up with a very minimal service and support that you get on an airline, and is still a customer in 2014. That's 11 years of business that customer's given you. So your winning of the customer 11 years ago is still generating your profits today. I think one of the extreme cases I came across is when we talk about the assets and the resources that a company like McDonald's has. And clearly, assets and resources like their serving staff are really important, right? They have very efficient serving staff. They're mostly very pleasant and they do a good job. And the company works very hard to make sure they retain those staff. Nevertheless, in the fast food industry generally, the average staff tenure is well less than 1 year. Some years ago, there was some statistics came out that the average job tenure in the fast food industry is 3 months. How long is the average life of a McDonald's customer? Many customers of McDonald's in their 60s and 70s became customers in their 20s. How many of you are still with the bank that you bank with today and opened your bank account? Well, let's ask. How many of you are still with the bank that you were with 20 years ago? Some of you are too young to have 20 years. Yeah, right. How many 10 years ago? Yeah. Okay. So whatever it was the bank did to get you as a customer 10 years ago is still there, and it's accumulating. You're accumulating that customer base. Of course, you might also be losing them. But it's not just tangible things. We accumulate reputation. We accumulate investor confidence, and it builds up over long periods of time. So these accumulations are really important. Then there is interdependence in the system. You've got to get many things right. It's not enough to just get one thing right. Ryanair must not just get the right fare, they must also be going to the right cities with the right flight frequency on the right day, and they must offer you the right choice of flights to different destinations, and they must have the right number of staff in place to make sure that the flights are well staffed. Okay? So it's not enough to get just one thing right. You've got to get many things right. And as I showed you on the previous slide, we've got feedback effects. There are feedback effects that continue to make things go better and better and better. Spectacular example, growth of Facebook users. Just an exponential growth where the more Facebook users there are, the more people feel that they need to be part of Facebook. But those things can go negative as well. Facebook had a competitor at one time called MySpace. MySpace made a little strategic error early in their life and started to lose users, and the more users they lost, the more the remaining users said, well, there's no point being on MySpace because my friends have left, so I'm going to go too. Right? That's a negative reinforcing feedback. Or you get these kind of balancing things where growth pushes up, but it comes up against some kind of limiting factor where that pushes down and it forces a stalling of your ability to make progress. And the last one, this one doesn't get the attention it needs. There are big threshold effects out there, really big threshold effects, where you can change something by a small amount and another small amount and another small amount, and nothing seems to happen. So you're marketing some nice new brand of drink in Spain, and you put some money in, and you do the advertising, and you count the awareness out in the marketplace, and the consumers say, yeah, I've heard of that product, but you still haven't got any sales. You've got millions of people who've heard of your product, but you've got no sales. Until you reach a threshold where a few people of those millions actually do start buying it, and then the thing takes off. Here's a kind of negative version of this. Imagine you are going to a regular meeting, or you're going to work, and you always take the same flight to the same destination, or you always take the same train journey. And one day, the train is 10 minutes late, or the flight is half an hour late. You're feeling, well, that's not good enough. I'm late for my meeting, or I'm late for work. The next day, the flight's on time, or the train's on time. You think, oh, okay, so that's all right. That's not a problem. Next week is 20 minutes late, or the flight's an hour late. Think, hang on, I'm beginning to get a little bit annoyed. Yeah, and 2 days later, it's even later. So now your anger is building up, and there comes a point where you say, heck, I've had enough. And you can track this. You can actually track this in consumers' state of mind, right? And at that point, you say, I've had enough. It's been too late, too many times. I'm going to switch. I'm going to start driving to work, or I'm going to switch to another airline, right? That's an example of a negative threshold being hit. You don't do anything until your annoyance reaches a certain level, and then you jump. I asked about how long people have been with their bank a few minutes ago. I've been with the bank I started with for over 40 years. And to my knowledge, in that time, the bank has made 2 mistakes in 40 years. 4 years ago, they made a mistake that was actually quite costly to me. And I was annoyed. Right? But you don't ignore that. One bank in the industry follows what they call miserable moments for their customers. They track any miserable moments that their customers have experienced. Now, if you know that a customer has had some miserable moments, what do you do about it? You give them what they call a magic moment, right? You give them something to say, oh, that was rather nice. I didn't expect that. So I was kind of intrigued. A couple of days after the bank made this mistake, there was a knock on the door, and one of these delivery people arrived, and they handed me a parcel, and I opened it up. It was a bottle of wine from the bank. And the bank was basically saying, terribly sorry we messed up. Here's something to say sorry. How do you think I felt after that? On a scale of 0 to 1, where was my annoyance level? It was 0, right? I'd completely forgotten about so that's an example of these thresholds, and it's also an example of state of mind. State of mind matters. Right? There are all kinds of state of mind that we need to track. And the reason I love system dynamics so much, I'm not a career-long system dynamics person. I came across this relatively late. But the thing I love about it is it deals with all of those things, all of them, explicitly, quantitatively. Right? It's amazing. I should say it's not only system dynamics that does this. It is one of a class of simulation methods which include agent-based modeling, discrete event simulation, which also can deal with all of those things. But those methods have got particular strengths in different environments. Agent-based modeling is very good where you've got geospatial situations. Discrete event modeling is very useful when you want to track what happens to individual entities. So what happens to individual participants? A student of mine wanted to use system dynamics, for example, to look at the army hospital provision for dealing with serious casualties at the front where people are getting shot and killed. And I had to say to them, look, you shouldn't use system dynamics for this. It is of no interest that there is a 90% probability that that all of the people here will come back alive. You need to know whether one person will come back dead or two people, right? So system dynamics, not the right tool for that kind of question. So how does system dynamics actually deal with the problems I just described? Well, let's take this one of the IT firm clients first of all, and I'll just trace you through the logic of how it works. So over here, we've got the number of problems being experienced by the average client of the company in a particular month. And that is caused by the pressure that the staff are under, which is simply how much work needs to be done divided by how much work can the staff do. That comes from how many support hours are needed for the clients divided by how many available staff hours are there. And those staff hours come from how many clients have we got and how many hours per month do we have to spend doing the work to support them. And where does available staff hours come from? Well, it comes from staff. It comes from 38 people doing 148 hours of work per month. So there's nothing mysterious about that. And the reason those things are in boxes is that they are accumulating stocks. The number of clients we have today is the number we ever won since we started the business minus the number we ever lost. The number of staff we have is the total we ever hired since the day we started minus all the people who left. So they are accumulating stocks. Now, those things are also true over time. So on the right-hand side there, you've got the pressure on staff curve there. The blue portion of the line is the history up to now, so the numbers match the previous slide, and the red is where things will go if we don't improve. So that is true also way back over to the stocks of clients and the stocks of staff. Now, how do these stocks behave? So here's the third principle one. We're concerned about performance over time. We're not concerned about comparative statics, right? We're concerned about performance over time. Principle two is that performance at any time depends on the quantity of these stocks. Principle three is that these stocks accumulate and deplete. And it turns out we know how to do this. We all know how to do this. That's why my bank account increased from $400 to $450. I paid in $250, I took out $200. That's just, that's not a statistical observation or a theory. That simply is the way the world works, right? I can't do anything to change the mechanism of those numbers. But just remember this. The number would have increased from 400 to 450 if I had paid in 50 and taken out nothing, or paid in 250, taken out 200, or paid in $1 million and taken out $1 million minus 50. All right. Now, what that says is that both sides of that matter. We need to know both the gains and the losses, because those are the things that we can affect. So here is my bank account playing out over time. And there is a trajectory that has been going on to the amount of money going in, and there's a trajectory on the amount of money coming out. There's the net change down below, and the thing in the middle shows what happens to the stock, the balance in my account. Well, the same is true of the IT support company. So here's the win rate over on the left. Remember I said we need to know both numbers separately. It's not enough to know just the net. On the left-hand side, that's what happened when we brought the business development person in. On the right-hand side, that's clients being lost. So the number goes, the clients go up as long as the left-hand number is bigger than the right, and the clients go down if the right-hand number is bigger than the left. Okay? No mystery here, I hope, right? This is not advanced statistics or anything. It's sums. We called it at school. In spite of the fact, by the way, that it is just sums, it turns out people cannot look at these pictures and figure out what's going on. If I put a kind of blank sheet over the client's number in the middle and ask people to sketch what they think that chart would be, given the numbers on the left and the right, almost nobody will get it right. And that's been tested hundreds of times on lots of audiences, including MIT master's students in IT. And you can't, it is just something the human brain can't do very well, right? It's not intuitively obvious why that number in the middle follows that path. So we now know what has happened to the stock, so now we just need to join that up to the performance. So there's the stock of clients. There is the amount of work that has to be done. There are two charts there. One is the work required to take on new clients. Right? When an IT company takes on a new client, they have to go and look at their IT equipment and their software, and that's quite a lot of work. So there's work to be done driven by the client gains, and there's work to be done to look after the clients you've got. So those are the two pieces of work. And that's where the imbalance comes between the work required and the work you can do, and that drives the pressure on staff, that drives the service problems. This is an example where we kind of hope that the problem is going to fix itself. If enough clients leave, our staff won't be overloaded anymore, right? It's not a nice way to fix the problem, but it does fix the problem. I have a suspicion this goes on a lot in business, and we just don't know. That because finance tells us all the time to keep our costs under control, we keep our costs under control by not having enough resources in place. We don't have enough staff, we don't have enough service staff, we don't have enough people on the phones, we don't have enough salespeople. So I have a suspicion this is happening a lot, and we actually don't know. Meanwhile, the same thing is happening down on the staff. So we're hiring at a relatively steady rate of 2 per month, but there's a loss rate on the right, and because of the pressure of staff, the loss rate jumps. So what we need to know now is what drives those flow rates. The things on either side of the stock are called flow rates. And we spend marketing money, we spend sales effort, we choose a price, we have competitors doing things to us. There's a whole load of things affecting those flows, which is what makes life difficult. So principle 4 is that there are 3 classes of things that affect that: decisions, external factors, and existing stocks. And we need to understand what those things are. We need to work out what the relationships are to those things. And when you put all that together, this is the system. All I've done is I've completed the links here. We've got the clients up the top being won and lost. We've got the staff at the bottom growing slightly and falling. We've got the pressure in the middle. And we've got the problems that we started worrying about over on the right-hand side. And that drives the loss rate of clients. That is the system. That explains why we are where we are, right? That is history telling us how the system works. And that thing on the right is, you see there's a loop there, there's a causal circularity, and that's called a balancing loop because it will bring things back into balance. Unfortunately, down at the bottom, we've got a reinforcing loop, which is actually going to make things worse. We lose staff, pressure on staff gets worse, so we lose more staff. So pressure on staff gets worse, and it's just a snowball running down the hill. Feedback is what we call this. Arises in all kinds of different situations, and it is always a result of a stock driving its own flow. Okay, always. There is no exception to that. Just a remark. This is work that was actually done by one of my students for the company they worked in, and this is a reproduction of what they did on the whiteboard with the company. So you can actually do this manually with a management team to tackle a real problem. So what the guy did was he did this with his colleagues at the company, and then we switched over and did the simulation model of it. I mentioned that we use SD system dynamics based exercises for fast and effective learning. So this is where I'm going to take a bit of a risk, and I'm going to ask for audience participation here. So what I'd like you to do, if your laptop is fired up and you are online, if you go to this URL, sdl.re/msny. Okay, by the way, you don't have to have a laptop. If you've got a tablet, you should be able to use this on an iPad. And if you have a phone with a decent sized screen, you can do it on your phone. The iPhone is probably too small. The BlackBerry is definitely too small. But if you've got a Nexus or a Samsung with a decent sized screen, you should be able to do this on your phone. So here's how it works. Don't touch that, the stop simulation button. This is a read-only model, but you should hit the reset button first, all right? Hit the reset button, and then if you play, you should see the simulation play out, and blue lines will fill in the charts as you go across, okay? So this company clearly made a mistake, and I guess you're all bright people. I guess you figured out the mistake they made was not to hire in advance of taking on this business development person, so that when they brought the work in, there were enough people actually in place to do the work. The question is, though, how many? How many people should I have hired? So what I'd like you to do is reset and change this number here. This is the number of staff you hire each month. It's currently 2. You know it needs to be more than that. Does it need to be 2.2, 2.5, 2.8, 3.5? How many do you have to hire so that this never happens? All right? This is clients lost. So if you hire enough staff and that doesn't happen, the number of clients will grow and it will not fall. So just take 2 or 3 minutes with whoever's shoulder you're looking over, and tell me, how many people do I need to hire so that I never lose any clients? And don't hire too many. I don't want you to tell me I'm going to hire 50. What is the smallest number I have to hire so that I don't lose any clients? While you're just trying that, I'll just point out some numbers here. With 2, I end up with 90 clients, right? I start with about 90 and I end with 90. So I've lost as many as I've won. So let me just try 2.2 and see what that does. Ooh, that gives me a great result. I've managed to get almost exactly the same number. All right, so 2.2 isn't going to be enough. How about 2.7? You have to reset each time, by the way. Oh, that's looking better. I've got 129. So can anyone tell me, how many do you have to hire so you never lose any clients? 3.2? Anyone got a different number than 3.2? 3.2, 3.3, let's just check that's right. Yeah, there we go. We've got up to 168 clients and there's no client losses. Get the idea? I mean, you can do all kinds of other things here. You could say, well, of course, we're looking at the company not at the start. We're looking at the company at about this point here, where the problem has already happened. So now the question is, you can run it up to that point, stop it there and say, okay, what are we going to do now? Let me do that. I'll reset. Like that. Pause it at that point. That's more or less where we came in, with client numbers going down. We're not winning anymore. So what do we do now? It's going to take time to build up our staff numbers by very much. Let's say I'm really optimistic. I think I could find 5 people a month. Is that going to solve the problem? Well, if I hire 5 people a month, yeah, it's just not there, right? 5 people a month has made no significant difference because you've got too much problem in the system already. And that's because down here in the lower part of the diagram, you've got this loss rate. This is the loss rate of staff, okay? So hiring 5, we put the hiring rate up, but we've got, so there's the staff numbers going up, right? But it's not enough to fix that problem. So there we go. That's just a little example of a class exercise you can do. Let me just quickly do this bit about the kind of general principles here. There are the 4 things I've told you about, and the business that explains the business system that's driving performance. And this gives you a generic model that we can adapt to many different kinds of businesses. Now, why do we need something better? Why do we need something different? Well, the tools that are used in my field, strategic management, tell you things about where to compete, how to compete, and they talk about the business model, but what they mean by a business model isn't anything like I've just shown you. It's just a list of things you ought to have and things you ought not to have. So we're interested in living business models, working business models that we can actually play with. And what these tools don't answer for you, they don't tell you what to do. They don't tell you when to do it. They don't tell you how much to do it. And they don't tell you what difference it will make if you do it. Right? So we're left with some pretty weak tools in the strategy field. Here are some examples. There's something called the 5 forces of competition in the industry. These 5 forces determine whether your industry is highly profitable or very unprofitable, and it tells you by how much profit varies, and it tells you how easy it is to be more profitable than the average. So the advice seems to be choose an industry like that one on the left. So what that says is, if you're in the airline industry, forget it. You're doomed to lose money because everybody in the airline industry does. What you really ought to be is a pharmaceutical company, because everybody there makes loads of money, right? Maybe true. Is it helpful? Not so sure. Then we have a tool called the value curve, where you identify the things that matter to customers and you rate what you offer against what competitors offer and what customers want. And the better you match what customers want, the better you are able to be more profitable than other people. We have what's known as the resource-based view, where we identify the resources you need: money, capacity, people, relationships with suppliers and that kind of thing. And if you build these capabilities, they will allow you to be more profitable than the average. So these tools, they are somewhat true and somewhat useful, but they use ambiguous terminology. So we can't even agree what performance is. Some use profitability, some use return on capital employed, some use economic value added, and there's very little quantification in these tools. It's very hard to quantify that resource analysis I just showed you. So there's no clear answers about what to do. If you haven't quantified anything, how can you figure out what I'm going to do? And they say nothing about profit growth, right? They talk about static results. They don't talk about where things are going. So let's see if we can do something about this. So this is a struggling business, all right? It started with a return on investment in 2000 of 15%. It's gone down and down and down and down and down to 2008, when it was particularly bad, and it's just managed to get its profitability back up to 4% or 5%. So this is a struggling business in real trouble, right? Well, actually, no, it's not. That's its actual profit, its cash profits in millions of euros, and I don't suppose any of you are surprised to realise that it's actually our friend Ryanair, okay? So if return on invested capital was what you want, if you had invested your money in 2000 and the firm had stayed the same size and delivered the same return on invested capital, you would have got the red line. If the company had improved its return on invested capital from 16% to 20%, you would have got the green line. Would you like the red line? Would you like the green line? Or would you like the blue line? No, I think most people would like the blue line, in spite of the fact that return on invested capital down there is pretty low. Now, you've got to be careful here. You do need to be profitable enough that you can drive that growth in profit, right? You can't be cash negative forever. Sooner or later, you've got to generate the cash to drive the growth. So this isn't a struggling business. The missing answers we need then is what to do, when, how much, at all times, across all functions, to grow the business and sustain it. Right? We want the business to throw out cash to us as investors, but it must also sustain its own growth. There are other performance over time questions, like service quality, for example. But we're looking here at investor interest. So here is the strategy positioning on the left-hand side. Who are we after? What are we offering? How are we going to do it? Well, that is true of all 50 of those low-fare airlines in Europe. That does not discriminate between the successful companies and the unsuccessful ones. And it hasn't changed since 1996 when Ryanair first started flying. Right? So that cannot possibly explain that line over there on the right-hand side. It's necessary, but not sufficient. Necessary, but not sufficient. And to complete this, we've got to get this stuff right in the middle. All those decisions, all the time, have got to be right, or mostly right, most of the time. And that's why this company has won in this industry, not that thing on the left-hand side. So what we need instead is specify the desired performance over time, link that performance to changes in the resources that we have, properly defined, show how those resources accumulate and deplete, and identify the impact of the interdependencies in the system and the decisions that you make on that system. And when you do that, you get this core system driving performance, and that allows you to decide what to do and what it'll do to your performance. Then you can add lots of other things. Once you've got this core understanding right, you can do lots of other stuff as well. This is kind of step 2 for Ryanair, where you've got the profit performance on the right-hand side, and it just drills back. So you've got customers at the top, then you've got staff numbers, aircraft numbers, airports, and the number of routes offered. And all of that is real data. But all of that is straight out of the company's report and accounts. Right? So we know all this. We know all these numbers. What we've never known before is how to put them together to explain that, right? But we do. It's not especially difficult. And when you do that, what you find is you've got these standard categories of factors that apply in all different cases. Just about every company has customers. Just about every company has some capacity, some staff, they have a product range or service range that they offer, they have cash, and they apply to all those different kinds of firms. For the airline, for example, the airports are what we call a point of presence. For Coca-Cola, those big red machines are a point of presence. It's a point at which you give yourself access to the market. In the case of an oil company, many oil companies, they don't know who buys their oil. They send their oil to a market and someone buys it. They've no idea who, and they don't care. They've got no relationship with the customer. They don't have a product range, it's just oil. And they have an additional category of resources called reserves. Here is customer gains and losses for Ryanair. There's their revenue, there's the passenger journeys they sold. There's 75 million back in 2012. And that came, we estimate, from about 15 million customers flying 5 times a year. There's customers being won and lost. They don't report this, by the way. Very few companies report the stocks and flows of their customers. So how are investors supposed to figure out whether they're doing any good or not, if you don't know whether they're winning or losing customers? And in this case, the decisions are, what's the fare to charge? What fare will we charge? There are external factors. That's a time chart of consumer spending change year on year. So there's 2008-9 where consumers stopped spending, and we hope they're going to start spending again. Existing resources, this is airports and routes driving growth. That's the growth in the customer base. And when we step back from that, we've got a generalized structure where customers drive sales, and with price that determines revenue. Products and capacity determine whether we can win and keep customers. Customers generate demand. We have staff and capacity determining supply. That determines whether you actually get the sales or not. These things cost money. These things make money. So there's revenue minus cost equals profit. pretty generic. It works in many, many different kinds of business. You just have to adapt it to the sector you're looking at. So here's a law firm. A law firm has clients. It offers services. Lawyers will do your wills, or they will buy your house for you, or they will do other services. They will handle your divorce. That's their services. They have lawyers. They don't have a physical capacity because lawyers are their physical capacity. They get cases, and their fee rate, that determines their revenue. Their costs come from how many lawyers they employ and if they do any marketing. Law firms are a nice, simple business structure. Here's a restaurant. A restaurant has customers who come and they buy meals, and they buy meals for a price. Our menu is our product range. We have chefs and waiters who determine our capacity to serve people. We've got seats. You can't sell seats in a restaurant if they're already full of customers. Revenue minus cost is profit. And if you want to do a restaurant business, I started my professional career in the restaurant industry. What you have to do is you just photocopy that structure for all of the restaurants in your business. 100 times that picture for the 100 restaurants in your company is the total profit contribution of all the restaurants in the business. There is another of these working models you can go to, SDL.RE MKST. If you go to that, it's another of these working models, and you can try your hand at building sales for a restaurant startup. Can you build sales and profits for the restaurant startup? Here's an oil company with proven reserves, unproven reserves. They have staff of different kinds. They have capacity of different types. The staff and capacity drive costs. We have transportation costs. Interestingly here, the revenue is driven by the extraction rate, not by the stock. Right? And there's a market price which we have very little influence over. We don't set the price in this case. It gets set in the market. So there's two more examples. Consumer product launch is at MZGT, and as a simple manufacturing company at MNQK. There are other examples in the software's help system, help.sistea.com/ws. You take this core structure and then you add to it the pieces that you need. So there are pieces to do with how competition works, competition for customers, competition for staff. We can handle those intangible factors. You remember that annoyance thing we did? How annoyed people get? Well, we had that in the IT company. That intangible annoyance was why we lost customers, and so we can add these additional frameworks that we need. Okay, I said at the beginning that this is not all about business cases, that the method is applicable across lots of different domains. It's been used in healthcare, defence, criminal justice, environment, all kinds of different things. And so here's just an example of that. This is a framework for how a disease spreads amongst a population. Here's a population of infected people. And if you have infected people, they infect more people who join the infected population, but after a time they recover and they become uninfected. So initially the infection rate is very low because there's very few of these people. Later on the infection rate is very low because almost everybody has been infected and they've recovered. So it's a well-known model in the disease world. So what can we do about this? Well, we have choices. We can vaccinate people so that the new infection rate is lower than it would otherwise be. Or we can treat people or take them or help them recover from the disease more quickly. It depends on the disease how effective this is. But those two things together radically reduce the prevalence of the disease and how quickly it gets eliminated. So here is a larger build-up of this. This is the piece I've just shown you. But those infected people come from an uninfected, susceptible population, and they go somewhere, and where they go is they go to a population that's resistant. So if people have had the disease and they are now resistant to it, they can't catch it again. This is well known in the disease world. It's called the SIR model, susceptible, infected, resistant. But what this does is it brings it to life. All right? It turns it into a working dynamic model. This is an example, by the way, where agent-based modelling brings very useful additional benefits here, because with agent-based modelling, you can track the geospatial spread of diseases. We're not just looking at total populations like we are here, so that's where that's useful. And a particular application of this at the moment is in the tendency of diseases to move from animal populations to human. And the reason we keep on getting flu every year is because the flu keeps mutating amongst pigs and chickens and ducks, mostly in the Far East. So we keep getting a new type of flu. So this is the same model, but this is the animal population, and we've got no people up here infected with the disease. But because people come in contact with the animals, they get infected. And one mutation means that the disease becomes infectious to us. This largely is the story of the emergence of AIDS, right? It's not a human disease. We caught it from the animal populations. So we get this happening to us over here. The problem is that we get continuing mutations. This process repeats increasingly fast. This is a very, very serious global threat, by the way. If you add to this the fact that our drugs don't work anymore, our antibiotics are beginning to fail, we've now got some very serious problems. Some people in the field regard this as more serious than global warming. This has the population to wipe out millions of people. I didn't want to end on that cheery note. But, that's the. I also mentioned that these methods are available for teaching to kids from about the age of seven or eight, probably. Kids can do this, and this creative learning exchange is a resource centre which provides learning materials more suited to school age people. So there we go. There's much more you can find out there. There's a full online course on how to do this, and we offer this free to teachers. So if you go to our website, you can take this course for free. It's a 10-class distance learning course, but every class is supported by these kinds of models. So just returning to this issue of efficiency in education, I hope that IT support company exercise I gave you earlier on shows how very quickly you can impart a really useful learning point. I mean, how long did that take? 5 minutes, 10 minutes? It just doesn't take any time, right? So you can get very fast learning very effectively. And remember, people learn much more from what they do than from what they hear or read. So giving people a chance to do things is where we need to go. Okay, so I guess I've left rather little time for questions, but I hope that's been useful.